Good afternoon. It's Friday the 21st of June, 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today, we have Ben Rubin, Debi Evans, and Cheryl Grainger. Welcome to the programme all. So, Ben, there's shenanigans going on at Cambridge University and, a lot of disinformation.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, there's shenanigans going on all over the place, in particular in our elite academic institutions. We're going to talk about Cambridge University today. But before I get into it, I'm just going to set a little bit of context. I didn't go to Cambridge University. I did go to prep school in Cambridge. I went to one of the college schools, St John's College School, from 7 to 13. I was a boarder there. It was quite idyllic, to be honest with you. It was a very privileged existence. At a young age, in a different era, we had the free reign of the town, all of the colleges, the quads, the backs, all of that history where we're able to go out into it. So I feel a very deep personal connection to the place. And although I was very young, I was left with an indelible understanding of the importance of its history, the university and its colleges. And I keep a keen interest in what's going on at the university. And I was interested to see this event pop up a few weeks ago. And actually, I became aware of this organisation a few weeks ago. And then some information came up this week about an upcoming event that I wanted to share with everybody. So this is the Cambridge Disinformation Summit. The first edition took place in King's College in 2023. Now, it describes itself as being focused on strategic disinformation, which is an accelerant for major societal problems such as climate change, extremism, polarization, fraud, and suppression of rights. Strategic disinformation is exploited across all information dissemination platforms, including social media, news media, financial and non-financial reporting, and other broadcast vehicles. And the purpose of the conference, as they articulate it, is to convene global thought leaders to discuss the societal impact of strategic disinformation, methods used to disseminate disinformation, the psychology of entrenched belief systems, and the means to mitigate disinformation efficacy. And at the 2023 event, they had speakers from EY, McKinsey, Rand Corporation, the World Health Organization, Ofcom, the World Economic Forum, Full Fact, Google, Meta, and really many of the key censorship players and, frankly, spreaders of disinformation that we've seen over the past few years. Now, it's hosted by a gentleman called Professor Alan Jagerlinzer, and I'll let him make a little introduction to the thinking behind the event.
All right, I want to welcome everybody to Cambridge University, to King's College Hall, and to the Cambridge Disinformation Summit. I'm Alan Jagerlinzer. I'm the professor of financial accounting, the head of the accounting faculty subject group, and the co-director of the Cambridge Center for Financial Reporting and Accountability with the Cambridge Judge Business School. Many people have asked me why accounting professors, many of whom are in this room, are convening a global summit on disinformation. And what I try to communicate is that we are actually in an information science. Financial accounting is inherently information science. And our field has deep experience creating and improving communication standards, accountability, infrastructure that include audit and regulatory enforcement to mitigate societal harm from financially oriented disinformation, which we typically call fraud. And now, more recently, we're moving into greenwashing. I started thinking about this idea of a convention when years ago, actually not too long ago, my nephew died from pandemic-related disinformation. Conversations with old friends and family members of mine turned into ad hominem attack anytime we got into any sort of discussion that countered their entrenched belief system. I've seen and continue to see sustained direct attacks on democratic institutions from politicians around the world who used to proudly support the same institutions and who had shifted to rhetoric and continue to use rhetoric that inspires things like extremist violence, and their rhetoric is easily falsifiable.
So Professor Jagerlinzer is an accounting professor inside Cambridge Judge business school, and he's taken it upon himself to convene this meeting and to place himself and accountancy at the center of the global debate about disinformation, which I think is a really quite striking thing for him to have done. If you understand this concept of leading beyond authority, I don't think that Professor Jagilinza has the authority to be leading a discussion about disinformation, particularly when he's inviting the kinds of people that we've already spoken about on the show. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up today is that earlier in the week, the professor announced the first headline speakers for the 2025 event. The first one was Nina Jankowicz, founder of American Sunlight and former Minister of Truth at the Department of Homeland Security. Also, Yoel Roth, who was at the Twitter Trust and Safety team, and he was involved in the censorship of the Hunter Biden laptop. And finally, Mariana Spring, our good friend Mariana from BBC Verify. Right now, my response to this was as so. I said, this is laughable. You have three of the world's biggest spreaders of disinformation on your panel. Nina Jankowicz and Yoel Roth both censored Hunter Biden's laptop in the run-up to the 2020 US presidential election. Roth may well face a custodial sentence at some point in the future for his role on Twitter's Trust and Safety team. Mariana Spring is a regime mouthpiece for one of the world's most dishonest and manipulative propaganda machines, aka the BBC, but at least we know what Cambridge University's position is on all of this, which in hindsight may have been a little bit punchy, to be honest with you. But I stand by pretty much everything that I said there. Now, the professor came back and essentially said that, Mr. Rubin, we welcome discussion about disagreements here, but not ad hominem attacks. Ad hominem attack is a commonly deployed tactic by disinformation actors. I guess he's maybe accusing me of being a disinformation actor. Platforming speakers to not indicate endorsement is simply opens discussion. So an ad hominem essentially refers to a rhetorical strategy where the speaker attacks the character, motive, or some other attribute of the person making an argument rather than attacking the substance of the argument itself. That's not what I did, right? I called out actions that had been taken by the individuals. It's not an ad hominem attack. It's a really important point to make. I did, however, make quite a significant error in my statement, and I do need to issue an apology, and it's an apology to Nina Jankowicz, and she very rightly pointed out, well, she said to me, you claim you have OSINT skills, open source intelligence skills, so perhaps you can quantify your claim that I'm the world's biggest spreader of disinformation. Can you tell me how I censored Hunter Biden's laptop when I was a private citizen during the 2020 election? I eagerly await what I'm sure will be a very logical and fact-based response. Now, Nina, as I said in my reply to you on LinkedIn, mea culpa, you are actually quite right to point out that in my hasty response to the professor's post, I inaccurately stated that you censored the Hunter Biden laptop in the run-up to the 2020 presidential election. You were not in government at the time. You couldn't have censored the laptop. It's not possible. My apologies. Yeah, it's on me. I absolutely retract that part of my statement. Please accept my apologies. What I will say, though, is that the laptop was censored. Right, and it was censored by people who subsequently went into the Biden administration, and you then took a job in that administration. And I think that that does bear a level of scrutiny, right? And I'm not suggesting that we all need to be perfect, by the way, far from it. That's why I'm here, and it's why I'm communicating this message to you. But we do have to take some accountability for the things that we're involved in when we're stepping out into the public sphere and talking about the issues that we're talking about. So who is Nina Jankowicz? Let me do you the service of giving you a bit of a better introduction than the one I made on LinkedIn. So Nina is the co-founder and chief executive officer of this organization, the American Sunlight Project. In a world clouded by disinformation, they're on a mission to bring clarity. Right? So their work focuses in three areas. They expose deceptive information practices and the networks of money that drive them. They educate the public about the threats that we face and the effects of disinformation in society, and they engage policymakers to return truth to our national discourse, all of which are actually very noble objectives. I just question the way, frankly, that you're going about them, Nina. I've looked into, your background. I've listened to a lot of your public statements, in particular recently. this panel session that was part of an 8-hour event called Vital Voices. We don't have time to share a video here, but I urge people to go and watch the session. And you describe quite a stressful period of time, to be honest with you. So when you took the job in the Biden administration, you were actually 34 weeks pregnant, and there was a whole tornado of things going on around you. It sounded incredibly stressful. And for the record, Nina, I'm sure you're a great mum. I'd imagine you're quite a lot of fun, actually. And as I say, we're not here to cast stones at you. This isn't personal. But if you are going to step out on these issues and make big statements about what is and isn't true, we're dealing with truth here. This is fundamental to the way that society runs. Then you're going to have to deal with people like me. And I'm not going to tiptoe around these issues. And I'm also going to point out things like the fact that Vital Voices, the forum that you spoke at recently, is run by someone who works for the World Economic Forum. I'm also going to point out that the Responsible AI Summit that you spoke at Waddesdon House earlier on this year is effectively controlled by Yad Hanadiv, the Rothschild Foundation, the power behind the Israeli state. And it's not hateful for me to point these things out. It isn't violence. It's not harassment. This is fact-based, robust public discourse. And I think that you need to learn how to engage in that. And as we all do, frankly, we need a better public discourse. So back to the Disinformation Summit. Who else was speaking? So we have this fella, Yoel Roth, pictured here giving testimony to the House Oversight Committee for his role in the censorship of the Hunter Biden laptop, basically working hand in glove at Twitter with the FBI, the CIA, to violate First Amendment rights, free speech rights. He had a strip torn off him, quite frankly, by this guy, Clay Higgins. I'll play the video in extra because we don't have time to go through it all now. And then finally, let's just have a little look at Mariana Spring, who is the final person announced on the lineup.
It's so concerning and loud, and people are now having to wade through a lot of information.
Some people might say that it's selfish that you don't want the vaccine but could pass it on to someone else. What would be your response to someone saying that?
My response to that is I don't really trust the vaccine.
Lots of things were coming in, like this embryo fetus something or pork.
We're worried about, particularly the first generation above 75, 80, that are actually...
Also in younger communities before this point.
The vast majority are hesitant, are cautious.
So, I mean, not much comment to be passed on that. I mean, it was absolutely ludicrous. And these are the three people that Professor Jagerlinzer has announced at his event. Just very quickly, just to finish up on what's going on at Cambridge. So we just saw there, actually, Lord Woolley of Woodford speaking to Mariana Spring at the end of that video. He has a prominent position now at Cambridge University as the principal of Homerton College. He's also a trustee for the Gates Cambridge Trust. That's an organisation that was set up in 2000 with a $210 million donation from the Gates Foundation, effectively bought the university. He's also deeply involved with the Open Societies Foundation, which is George and Alex Soros. You can see him here providing a personal thanks to those two. And finally, the event is going to be held at, the disinformation event is going to be held at King's College, Cambridge. The new provost of King's College, Cambridge is this woman, Gillian Tett, who is also a long-time editor and writer at the Financial Times. She's still the chair of the editorial board at the Financial Times while being in her position at King's College. Financial Times is owned by Nikkei Group, which is a World Economic Forum partner, which means that the World Economic Forum is controlling what's happening essentially here in Cambridge University. And actually, this was the flag flying on the Financial Times' roof yesterday afternoon. So you tell me what you think is going on at the FT and at Cambridge University and elsewhere in the system.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Now let's move on then to Pfizer and vaccines. And I want to welcome Cheryl Grainger to the screen, to the program. But before we do, just to put the UK Column website on screen here, because if we could do that, please, Stephanie. Sorry, there we go. Yes, thank you. And so there we go. UK Situation Room, Pfizer Moderna document analysis. So Cheryl, just first of all, just remind everybody what that page is all about.
Hi, Mike. Hello, everybody. Yes, this is the Pfizer-Moderna document analysis that basically now has 99 reports on it. We've been able to summarise those reports, and there are links to the actual reports with the Daily Clout. So if anybody wants to see more information on what I'm going to talk about in a moment, they can easily access this information. So if we go to Report 95, Report 95 is basically with 96 talking about whether this is a vaccine or gene therapy. And what it makes a comment of to start off with is the changed information in vaccine definition. So to start off with, they basically said that the vaccines produce immunity from disease and protect a person from disease. They've dropped the protection bit, which is the word that was used to license these vaccines in the UK. And the FDA has basically got the mRNA gene therapy product. It considers that it's gene therapy. It's said that gene therapies for humans seek to modify or manipulate the expression of a gene or to alter the biological properties of living cells. And Moderna talked about the number and design of the clinical trials and preclinical studies required for the approval of these types of medicines, genetic medicines, have not been established. So that's covered in 95. In Report 96, it continues on looking at vaccine and gene therapies, and it asks the question, why was the wrong committee selected for the mRNA COVID-19 shots? So the FDA has a responsibility over the health of the public, but it also has responsibility for the billions of pounds that are made from these products. And it chose to use here we go with acronyms, the VRBPAC, how about that? The Vaccine and Related Biological Product Advisory Committee assessed these products that they called vaccines rather than the one it should have gone to, which is the Cellular Tissue and Gene Therapy Advisory Committees. So the vaccine term was acceptable to more people. It's a non-threatening concept and it's got widespread acceptance. But we've basically got these vaccines, which are really gene therapies, actually being handled. We can ask the question then if the FDA is actually exhibiting willful misconduct, and there's a definition of what that involves. And of course, that could be equally thrown at the MHRA. The MHRA, by the way, has 4 expert committees on vaccines and then 1 on gene therapies that doesn't seem to, it seems to be sidelined from the MHRA, and that's something we'll probably do some more work on. So the 97th report, that looked at obscuring myocarditis safety signals. And what happened here was that in spring 21, the FDA granted EUA for children to be given the vaccines above the age of 12. And by May 21. And here's a report that includes information with names. So there are 3 names mentioned here of people who are involved in assessing safety signals. There's a Dr. Thompson who was in charge of this, and she noticed myocarditis, but nothing was done about it. All their signals are based on observed against expected values. So that's what they're seeing compared with what they expected to see. And if it's greater than 1, that ratio, then that is a signal. What they used for myocarditis, the FDA used expected values from Sweden in 2007 data. They didn't take into account any differences between sex and age and this particular signal. In April 21, we got the Israeli researchers talking about myocarditis, and Dr. Thompson didn't acknowledge this risk, but covered her back eventually by writing a paper in January 22. In Report 98, again, it goes back to vaccine against gene therapy. And it talks about gene therapy products have a greater potential risk because you get delayed adverse reactions. And examples of that would be the development of malignancies, impaired gene function, and prolonged exposure to proteins and autoimmune reactions. So the report 98 is basically showing that they should be genetically modified products should go through heavier testing, more rigorous testing, proof of potency, safety and stability. Their toxic testing should be more detailed. And then the final report looks at the CDC hiding deaths and injuries. And this is by a guy called Albert Benavides, who's a data analyst. And he talks about time displacement. So there's one VAERS report of a 39-year-old male with cerebral venous thrombosis. And he was injected, it says, 7,405 days before he got the onset in July 21. The outcome was also not recorded. And there are thousands of time displacements in VAERS. There's 1,239 with the wrong dates on them, and there's 73,671 with unknown dates going back to the 1900s, which is obviously errors that are put into the system. Reformatting obfuscation is his second thing he talks about, which is a cloaking technique. So, for example, a lot have been described as multiple organ system involvement. So that means that a report is submitted, there's quite often no outcome except saying there's permanent disability, and that's not classified. And then you've got multi-system illness cases that are siloed into a category called other. And in a moment, I'll talk to you about general disorders in our UK yellow card data. So we have some information now about I suppose this links into Ben, the three common misinformation statements that I see constantly being used that I just want to clarify. The first one is where COVID vaccines have saved lives. Excuse me. Thousands and millions of lives have been saved by these vaccines. This is a friend of mine, Alan, he's another engineer. He's a data analyst, and he's taken a look at the information. So this is the government's own information that shows the recorded UK deaths with COVID in 2020. So this is pre-vaccines. Basically, that works out as 90,475 have died with COVID by the end of 2020. This has got to be against the risk of death from COVID at the start of the pandemic. At that time, we said that the fatality rate was about 0.25%. And if you've got 67 million population, then you end up with 167,500 at risk of death. We've then got UK people still at risk of death with COVID by January 21, and that gives us 77,000 and a few still at risk. And then you can look at the total number of UK deaths with COVID in, all the way through to May 24, and that shows that 232,112 had died with COVID since the start of, as Alan calls it, the corona panic. And then you can look at the number of UK deaths with COVID from January to May, from January 21 to May 24, which is when the vaccines were given. There were no, the number of deaths after the vaccine are shown in that bar. So finally, the number of people who died with COVID after vaccine rollout was more than the number of people still at risk. And that is 64,612. So you've got to ask, did the vax cause more COVID deaths? And did it also increase COVID mortality? And then just quickly, we've got a graph that shows the range of deaths and the categories that they fall into. We can show that, yes, we have a lot of information in the press about very extreme rare conditions, and that's what they always refer to an adverse reaction as. But there are lots of things that very commonly have presented themselves that are not actually rare. They're abnormally common. And you can see the groups there: general disorders, nervous system disorders, cardiac disorders, respiratory disorders, infections and vascular disorders. Contains lots of side effects that are things that should have been investigated. They're definite signals. And I'm probably running out of time, but the other thing that is misinformation is the fact that they never investigate causality. And I've given you some links that will be in the notes that link to the proof of causality through the Bradford Hill criteria, which shows that there are definite links. And as Dr. Peter McCulloch has actually stated, the Bradford Hill, which is this set of criteria for causality, the tenets of causality have been fulfilled on a more probable than not basis. Upgrade that to a clear and convincing basis. The vaccines have caused death. And that's what I want to leave you with, the facts that are being misrepresented to us.
Okay, Cheryl, thank you very much for that. No doubt we'll be talking a bit more about that in extra. And Debi, let's then welcome you to the programme, and let's talk a little bit more about antimicrobial resistance.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. Is antimicrobial resistance even real? Well, let me paint you a little picture. So I told you about a high-level meeting with the United Nations, which was going to be held in September 2024. So this is coming up very soon. I think we've got a slide of it there towards specific commitments and action. But also AMR is a bigger agenda. So we're also looking at children, protecting children. So we have a UNICEF report now talking about antimicrobial resistance, the urgent threat of drug-resistant infections. A lot of people are talking about antimicrobial resistance, in fact, but hey, don't take my word for it, because on the longest day of the year, on Prince William's 42nd birthday, let's hear what Prince William has to say about AMR.
We stand at a critical juncture where the interconnections between drug resistance, climate change, and environmental degradation cannot be ignored. Rivers are polluted with antibiotics, and oceans are filled with microplastics containing resistant bacteria. Meanwhile, deforestation is playing havoc with ecosystems, facilitating the emergence of new infectious diseases. Unless we act now and together, the ripple effects of drug resistance will be felt across generations, jeopardizing the well-being of our children and our grandchildren.
So what are antimicrobials? So I've got a slide here that will show you that antimicrobials actually include antivirals, antiparasitics, antibiotics, and antifungals. And all of those arrows that you see, that's how many sustainable goals AMR relates to. So you've got life beneath water, you've got sanitation, clean water. It's a big sustainable goal agenda. But what does this mean for each and every one of us? So courtesy of Dr. Christian van Tulleken, who's a celebrity television doctor, on behalf of the UK HSA, let's see what each and every one of us and our doctors are going to be asked to do.
When was the last time you had an infection? It probably wasn't a great worry because you know you can just get some antibiotics. But the problem is that antibiotics don't kill bacteria as well as they used to. The bacteria have become resistant. In fact, there are some bacteria which are now totally resistant to all antibiotics. This is one of the biggest threats to everyone on Earth, and the problem's only going to get worse. Unless we act fast and together, we're going to enter an era where no antibiotics work. It will be like going back to the 1930s. Infections that we now regard as trivial were often fatal. Complex surgery was impossible because of the risk of infection. Did you know cancer treatment destroys the immune system? Most patients need antibiotics to survive. Imagine, no more heart, bowel, or bone operations. No more cancer treatment. This is where we're headed. But with 3 very simple steps, we can all become antibiotic guardians. Step 1, don't demand antibiotics from your doctor. We don't need them every time we're ill. In fact, although everyday infections may make you feel unwell, antibiotics make very little difference to colds, flus, and sore throats and coughs. So ask a pharmacist about over-the-counter remedies that can treat your symptoms. Step 2, take antibiotics exactly as they're prescribed. Never save them for use in the future. Never give them to someone else. Step 3, spread the word. Tell your friends and family to use antibiotics properly. Send them this video. Antibiotics are some of our most precious medicines, and we're going to lose them unless we all become antibiotic guardians.
So there you are. You're going to be asked to become an antibiotic guardian. But what are the drivers? What do they say the drivers are of antimicrobial resistance? Well, there are many things, but humans, of course, we're a driver, terrestrial and aquatic mammals, food and feed, water, sanitation and hygiene. Come on to that again in a bit. But so we're going to be antibiotic guardians. And what are each and every one of us going to be asked to take? Well, we're going to be asked to take a pledge. Let's have a listen to just a couple of examples.
I pledge to help tackle antimicrobial resistance,
to protect ourselves,
our animals, and our environment. I pledge to safeguard antimicrobials like antibiotics
by using them responsibly for personal health
and for the health of pets
and farm animals.
Because I want to make sure that antibiotics will work when we need them most.
I will advocate for responsible antibiotic use.
I believe everyone has the right
to safe and nutritious food
and good health.
And the more we invest in sustainable agriculture,
the faster we can achieve this.
I support the campaign to stop superbugs.
I support the campaign to stop superbugs.
I promise to handle antibiotics with care.
I promise to handle antibiotics with care.
So are you ready to make your pledge? But just to tie this segment up, we always watch what's going on in Australia. What happens in the Southern Hemisphere happens in the Northern Hemisphere. And in Australia, we've got parents queuing up and going to so many different pharmacies to try and get medicines and antibiotics for children. We've also got a recent story in the Mail that's warning of shortages of antibiotics for whooping cough. But lucky for everyone, there is a jab. Now, just since this morning, actually, thanks to Dr. David Cartland, who texts me to say that GPs in the NHS have been asked now to scale back on antibiotics for children for pneumonia, some shortages. There are pneumonia, whooping cough, and other respiratory viruses. They're saying that GPs are recommending alternative medications, and Pfizer have now restricted azithromycin antibiotic to everywhere except for hospitals. And azithromycin is also a targeted antibiotic for Shigella, but we'll come on to that. So antimicrobial resistance, keep your eyes out.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Now, if you like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us, the options are at support.ukcolumn.org. We do need your help. If you can possibly help us out, that would be fantastic. Do share material you find on the various platforms. Unfortunately, not on Facebook unless you do it, because we can't. But pick something up at the UK Column shop. And I want to thank everybody once again that's picked up a copy of Your Life in their hands. If you want to understand Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 and this sort of context to it, that's what you need. So thank you very much to everybody that has done that. The interview that went out yesterday with Brian and Daryl Ingram, who's standing for the Heritage Party, in Southwest Devon, is up on the website. Debbie's blog isn't up there yet, but will be later on today. And finally, a quick reminder of a date for your diary, which is Saturday, the 19th of October in Bristol. We'll announce the venue for this later on, or closer to the time. So we will be live. We'll have a proper title for this event as well. We'll be there all together in one room. So we're looking forward to that very much in October. So keep that date for your diary. And finally, next weekend is the Sounds Beautiful Festival in Wimborne and Dorset. And we will be there as well, so join us for that too. Now, on Wednesday's programme, was talking about the EU legislation over end-to-end encryption and the mass surveillance of people's chat and so on. That vote was supposed to take place on Wednesday, about whether to push forward with this programme. But the aim was to try to get this vote through before the new European Parliament sits. And unfortunately for the Council of Europe, that was not possible. And in fact, it was Germany and France that decided to vote against it. So let's just do a quick translation of this. Germany votes against chat control in Netzpolitik here. And so that means that it couldn't go forward before the change of the presidency. Now, of course, the European Union has 3 presidents, because if you're an organization like that, of course, you need 3 presidents. But the presidency of the Council of Europe changes. It's currently Belgium are host, are mainly the president at the moment, until the 30th of June 2024. And the presidency passes to Hungary after that. Now, Hungary, unfortunately, is putting this particular topic back on the agenda. And so it hasn't gone away, despite the defeat at this stage. It will come back, and so people still need to be paying attention. Now, in the meantime, of course, over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the cyber attack, the ransomware attack on the NHS, particularly the London hospitals. And, well, the people responsible for that have now posted. This graphic is from the BBC. They took an image from the organization's dark web site. Quite a lot of data has now, several hundred gigabytes of data has now been uploaded, including people's medical records, their names, addresses, dates of birth, NHS numbers, and so on, descriptions of the blood tests that they were taking. That's now been published because the NHS didn't pay the ransom, and so that is now available. Now, the organization, King's College NHS, that was responsible for this, was posting this on the 19th of this month. The ransomware attack on pathology provider Synovus is continuing to impact our services. So this isn't just about the data that's been published. This is also about the continuing impact on the NHS that's happening. So the organization behind this, we'll just mention the fact here before we mention the organization behind this. That is the NHS Digital was tweeting this out on May the 9th this year. Ransomware is a form of malicious software that makes data or systems unusable until the victim makes a payment. Reduce the risk. Well, they clearly weren't capable of reducing the risk within the NHS or within NHS suppliers. Huge quantities of data going missing. So anyway, the ransomware itself is something which is called Agenda, and it's been created by an organization called Kilin, which is Qilin, which is allegedly Russian background. But they run quite a business model here because it's run on the basis of a sort of affiliate scheme. So I can, as an individual, can go along to them and say, right, I want to attack this particular NHS hospital. Can you create some software for me which targets that particular organization specifically? They will provide me with the software. And then if I manage to get paid off, I get to keep 85% of the Bitcoin or whatever is sent to me. So it's quite an affiliate program. It's a bit better than NordVPN if you're into this kind of thing. But anyway, this doesn't just apply. It's not just one case. This has been going on for quite some time. So this is NHS Scotland from earlier in the year. I think this is March the 11th. So this was on a ransomware website that NHS Scotland had 3 terabytes of people's personal information published on the dark web. And they did, in fact, acknowledge this. So this the cyber attacks on NHS Dumfries and Galloway was the headline on the NHS Dumfries and Galloway website. And what it says here is that the cyber criminals said they would publish stolen data unless their unspecified demands were met. On Monday, the 6th of May, 2024, they carried out that threat, publishing over 3 terabytes of data. So this is a very common thing. Now, this is something that we've all got to be vigilant about because, of course, this is all our personal data and therefore it could result in identity theft and others. But in the meantime, Kaspersky, who is one of the companies that has set itself up over the last couple of decades to try to fight this type of attack and various other types of cyber attack, is now banned in the United States. So this is the report from the US government. To protect our nation, the Department of Commerce has issued a final determination prohibiting Kaspersky Lab, Inc. and its affiliates, subsidiaries and parent companies from engaging in transactions involving the provision of certain cybersecurity and antivirus products and services to US persons. And I just find that really fascinating because they're alleging connections to the Russian military and therefore it is considered a risk. Well, this is just another example of it. Commerce Department prohibits Russian Kaspersky software for US customers. We just got to remind ourselves that, of course, it's not just people like this that are involved with national governments and so on. This particular article here, Operation Triangulation, the last hardware mystery, is talking all about an attack on iPhones. which seems to have come from people associated with the US government. So everybody is involved in cyber attacks and so on. And we cannot forget Unit 8200, which has spawned so many organizations that are involved in security on the internet, not least Checkpoint, Palo Alto Networks, and so on. And we talked about this before, the various leaders and so on. But the Israeli Cyber Companies Consortium, all organizations that have been spawned by Unit 8200, which is an Israeli government intelligence agency, and so on. We've got Checkpoint announcing a new collaboration with Microsoft to supercharge Infinity AI Copilot, which is absolutely built into every Windows 11 operating system that you have on your PC. We've got UK county councils involved with Unit 8200 spawned companies. We've got NHS involved with Checkpoint. This just goes on. So it is quite an incredible situation that we single out organizations that are probably best at providing security, but because they have a claimed association with the Russian government, they get banned, while we've got Israeli spawned companies absolutely hoovering up huge quantities of bulk data, and we don't seem to worry about those at all. Debi, let's come back to you.
Yes. Is our water infrastructure fit for purpose? Well, according to the Financial Times, 2 water companies don't have complete maps. Now, they're talking about Southern Water and Thames Water. I can tell you that South West Water, my own water company, they don't have their own maps. I actually mapped our area for them and they're using my maps. So it's not fit for purpose. And why isn't it fit for purpose? Well, underneath our streets, and what we don't see in plain sight, hidden, are fatbergs, who, I'm sorry if it's lunchtime and you might want to skip through that one, but fatbergs, the growing menace underneath our streets. We had one blocking Sidmouth sewer that was so big it took 8 weeks for South West Water to remove. And another one there, you've got 400 tonnes in Liverpool. So clearly they don't know where their pipes are, otherwise we wouldn't have fatbergs, right? In CNN Travel produced this article saying England was basically turning into the dirty man of Europe. And it's something that I've been saying for a very long time. 14 out of 80 of the bathing beaches were off limits in Cornwall, for example. But in June 2022, I wrote this article for UK Column called The Re-Emergence of Victorian Diseases. And I think we need to be really looking at what we lived with pre-sewers and pre-mains drinking water. If I take you back to the map that I've shown you before from the WHO, highlighting what would appear to be targeted epidemics moving forward. And you can see, as Diane highlighted, and I've highlighted before, E. coli and cryptosporidium for Western Europe and the UK. So when we talk about epidemic preparedness, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine have got their own centre for epidemic preparedness. So this actually include? Well, it includes a lot of scientists, statisticians, behavioural scientists, we've got pharmacologists, we've got government, you name it, they're all involved in it. Sorry, Mike, did you want to say something?
No, it's just you broke up there very badly, Debi. It's okay. Continue.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so we've got this epidemic preparedness centre, and of course the story of E. coli is still rumbling on. So is it the weather? Because E. coli is being blamed on weather now. The Telegraph had this story, and then we had another story running in Sky talking about, is it too early to determine the source of E. coli? Could it be lettuce? Was it lettuce? On Monday, Diane was also covering the validity of antimicrobial resistance, and she showed this slide indicating that the UK HSA are investigating Shiga toxin producing E. coli, a STEC outbreak. Now, this is very different. So E. coli is commonly divided into 2 broad types. You've got the Shiga toxin, E. coli 0157, remember that, 0157, and the non-Shiga toxins. So you can see the ones that I've marked in with the arrows are related, they're endemic and they're in the UK. The others are abroad. But what is shigellosis otherwise known as? It's actually known as bacillary dysentery. So when I went to the NHS page to look up dysentery, there you go, 2 types of dysentery, bacillary dysentery or shigellosis, which is caused by Shigella bacteria. This is the most common type of dysentery in the UK. So Diane also was talking about, drinking water, and we need to be able to drink water. And if we get dehydrated because we've got tummy bugs, there could be a problem. So how do you treat dysentery? Well, you treat it by you keep rehydrated. So keep drinking, stay at home until at least 48 hours after the last episode, which could last 7 days. So here we go again. Does that sound familiar? They're asking you to stay in. They're also saying that you might need to submit regular poo samples. So all these bowel tests that you've been getting through your door, is that trying to get you used to giving poo tests? And they're saying that very young children are also at risk. And if we go on to look at what the WHO say about Shigella, they say considering the potential of herd immunity and protection from all-cause diarrhea, the development of a Shigella vaccine is an important goal. So what kind of preparedness has been going on behind the scenes? Well, we've got tabletop exercises. One was a student who contaminated lettuce with Shigella soni. We've got another dismissed athlete who contaminated ice with E. coli. This is all part of the tabletop exercises. And then we look at the Shigella vaccine. Sorry, if you just go back one slide there, Mike, very quickly. So phase 2 of a clinical trial looking for a Shigella vaccine. So we should all be watching out. Now, this is very interesting because people were actually asked to drink Shigella in a milkshake or a tablet, which sounds pretty gross to me. And then antimicrobial resistant Shigella, where do we go next? Well, clearly they're saying that this is a public health catastrophe. So what happens after that? Well, you might be interested to know that there's a little tiny, very short video just saying what is dysentery and what do we do? I don't know if we've got time to show that, Mike.
Go ahead.
If there's no blood in the stool, it's not dysentery. Now, to clarify, when I'm saying blood in the stool, I mean literally bright red blood mixed in with the stool, not just a little bit on the paper when wiping, because depending on how often you're going to the toilet, it's not unusual to get some irritations around the back passage. And straight away with that, that means that we can remove any of the dysentery-causing issues, such as entamoeba, E. coli 0157, Shigella, Campylobacter. Any of those things can be taken off the table straight away.
So that's just a little bit of information. And here's a little bit of information on the E. coli that he was talking about, E. coli 0157, which can be found in the guts of animals and also in their feces, contaminated food, undercooked meat. But finally, do you remember Bill Gates' catastrophic contagion? Here's a little tiny short piece of video just to remind you of what he forecasts is coming up next.
As of today, there have been an estimated 1 billion cases worldwide, with more than 20 million deaths, including nearly 15 million children. Countless millions are alive, but left with paralysis or brain damage. The most successful countries are those which invested in preparedness and trained for this moment years in advance. This included having full-time pandemic preparedness and response teams, which conducted detailed operational planning and routinely tested those plans through exercises and drills. If more countries had participated and heeded the guidance, the toll might have been much less.
And just to say, catastrophic contagion was about a tummy illness, enteric illness, and for the record, all of the medicines for Shigella appear to be out of stock.
Yes, okay, thank you, Debbie. Now, very briefly, a bit of net zero news. We were talking on Wednesday about the fact that Russia has decimated Ukraine's electricity generating capacity. If we put that on screen. And if you want to see that, look at John Helmer's report here. Well, you'll be glad to know that Zelensky has announced that they're going to solve that problem with solar panels. So solar panels, smart meters and energy storage units must appear in every school and hospital as soon as possible. He says that's how they're going to solve the problem. So no problem there. In the meantime, in Ireland, we have this from News Talk. Domestic solar power output up 80% in a year is the answer. So, of course, if you're starting from nowhere, that might sound quite a lot. But in fact, it's not really, because what they're quoting a representative of the Irish Solar Energy Association, in fact, the chief executive, Conal Bolger, who's saying we delivered 500 megawatts in the last 12 months effectively. And I thought, hold on a second, 500 megawatts, that's not very much, because over 12 months, I'm assuming he means, I don't actually know what he means, but I suggest this is a bit of fake news, a bit of disinformation, because if you take 500 megawatts over 12 months, there are 8,760 hours in a year, so that's only 57 kilowatt hours, and that's what, about two houses worth. It's not very impressive. So Ireland clearly not doing very well with their solar power there. I just thought we'd mention that in passing. But back to you, Debbie, on flooding.
Yes, this is my life. Welcome to my world. So let's start off first with a paper, Infectious Diseases After Hydraulic Disasters. And I just wanted to highlight that because you can see E. coli there. You can see all the things that we've been talking about with regards to antibiotics and AMR. Also, Chris Whitty has a big agenda, it seems, on sewage. However, he's never replied to me, but he refers to this National Engineering Policy Centre. You'll see the paper there on the right-hand side. He's very interested in sewage. In fact, in his 2021 annual report, he focused on health in coastal communities. And what he said about health in coastal communities was related to flooding. So if we look at the report, and you can see the next chapter is about flooding, and it talks about, if you just skip on to the next slide, Mike. That's it. So the conclusion there is that flooding is going to become increasingly important for poor health. So if we skip on to the next slide again, there's a couple of statistics. If you've been a victim of flooding, you're 5 times more likely to get depressed, 7 times more likely to get anxious, 10 times more likely to get PTSD. And I can tick all of those boxes. Now, Sky News has been posing problems and dangers about shellfish and E. coli getting into shellfish farms. This is something that's been going on for absolutely years and years. But the report goes on to say that last year in Cornwall, for example, we had all sorts of sewage discharges, 13,000 sewage discharges, courtesy of South West Water, which puts our mussel farms and oyster fishermen at risk. In 2017, Corporate Watch published this paper on South West Water, pollution, floods and profits. And you can see there that residents reported 165 incidents of internal sewer floods, where there's actually been an early day motion put into action. That's early day motion 862 if anybody wants to see it. But this is nothing new. We've been screaming about this for years. And even in the Mail, this is one of the bosses at South West Water saying, don't swim in the rain, because if you do, we're pumping out sewage at the same time. So this is not a new thing. Then I went back to the CFAS reports. Not a lot of people know that these CFAS reports exist. They're sanitation reports. So I'm just taking this one for an example, Foy Estuary in Cornwall, 2010, where they're talking about E. coli in bivalves, and they're showing significant positive relationships. If you just skip on through the report, it says that the southwest of England is one of the wettest regions in the United Kingdom. Yes, it certainly is, and it's prone to flooding. Here's some results for you that just shows that the sea is a discoloured colour. It's brownish. There's all sorts of rubbish on the beach, not very nice stuff at all. If we skip on again from there, I've just a little map of Ready Money Cove, very pretty little beach in Foy. I've just marked the 2 sewer outfalls and the beach, which is just inland. And on the beach is a South West Water pumping station. So it's not terribly pleasant. Recently, Fergal Sharkey decided to come down to Cornwall. I do hope he's watching, because Fergal, I would really appreciate a talk with you, because he's taken on the fight against sewage spills in Cornwall. And as a fly fisherman, he noticed that rivers were polluted. So last week he was visiting Cornwall and he was apparently slamming South West Water, saying that we should all be on the beaches protesting. And he even tweeted this little map showing how disgusted he was about what was going on with sewage spills. However, the real truth and the reality is actually this. And this is my road. These are my photographs. You see clear flow there, pumping out the sewers, and that's my road covered in water. sewer floods in homes. And I think we've got a little tiny bit of video, only 10 or 20 seconds, just to show you what happens when a sewer surcharges and what the result is. Have a look at this. And I've had 101 of those, so I consider myself an expert by experience when it comes to water companies and water infrastructure. Now, Fergal Sharkey told us that he and the local Labour candidate were going to be on the beach. He told us to come to the beach to meet him, so I did. There's my picture, but he didn't turn up. The arrow's pointing to the sewage treatment works in the background, which isn't terribly pleasant. But meanwhile, while I was waiting on the beach, I found this document from the ECDC. Sorry, I always get that acronym wrong. And it says that for disease prevention and control, they appear to suggest another possible attack on the unvaccinated. And they're writing there that if you are unvaccinated for COVID, this could put you at more risk of enteric diseases. So already we seem to be bringing in a division with the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. Now, I messaged Fergal Sharkey and I asked him if we could talk to him because internal sewer floods are extremely important. And he's replied to me twice, but my phone is still yet to ring. So if you are listening, I really am keen to inform Fergal of what's going on, not just in rivers and in the sea, but in our own homes. So if you're listening, perhaps you could contact me. And Mike, I think you're going to take us through the next few slides because it's quite hard for me. Customer experiences of sewer flooding, they know what it's like for us, but they choose to ignore us.
Well, I'll just read out a couple of the comments here. At the time, I felt very on edge, very anxious, and a bit emotionally fragile. It was quite tough. Obviously, it's the place where I live, and sewage flowing out in a way that you can't really stop. You're just watching things get worse. And we've got a comment here, being flooded with sewage is one of the most distressing things that can happen to you in your home. And yet this is a very real experience for thousands of households every year. They're talking about the lasting effects, the psychological and emotional damage, often leaving people in vulnerable circumstances. And where's that comment from, Debbie, that forward?
All of these comments are from the report that Ofwat and the Consumer Council for Water put out, the report that you've just shown in a couple of previous slides. Okay, and there's a few more comments from it as well.
Let's just have a look at another couple. It meant I couldn't use the bathroom. I've had guests around. It's pointless if you can't use it. You can't have a shower or use the toilet without it overflowing. My flat felt pretty gross. I don't want to invite people over and ask them, why does your flat stink of eggs? They've not categorically told us about what the cause is. The water company is not transparent about what's going on. By the look of it, the pumping station is inadequate to cope with, we might dispute that particular comment, perhaps having chosen the best one with climate change, they say, making things worse. Well, maybe that gives us a clue as to what people believe, Debbie.
Yeah, and I just want to say that homes are blighted, lives are ruined. I live in a house without a bathroom, no hot water, no heating. It's a nightmare. It's continual floods and we're still invisible. So Fergal Sharkey, if you're listening, please message me. I'd love to interview you. Okay,
thank you, Debbie. Well, that is a standing offer. So please do get in touch, Fergal, if you can. Ben, let's come back to you then. And the future of Britain.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to stay with the topic of human excrement and talk about Tony Blair. So he's got the Future of Britain conference coming up on the 9th of July this year, just a few days after the general election. And if you want to find out what the next government is going to be doing, then this is the place to go, because you've got Rachel Reeves, the current Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. You've got Lord Hague, former leader of the Tory party. You've got Patrick Vallance speaking there, plus a bunch of other people. This is all being run and hosted by Tony Blair, obviously, alongside his sidekick, his buddy, Mete Choban. And I first heard about Mete Choban last year when Debbie and I both watched the future Great Britain conference. And Debbie, I hope we're going to do that again because it was quite fun. And anyone else who wants to find out what's going on, I'd recommend signing up to that because it's free and you can get a good insight into what the global elite are planning. Now, Meti Choban has been very active, as we've spoken about previously. He is the chief executive and founder of this organisation, which is My Life, My Say, which is a UK-based charity surrounded by an absolutely astonishing array of different organisations, the US State Department, MI6, various Rothschild affiliates, and they have been basically set up for the explicit purpose of getting young people into the political system. They've been running this campaign called Give an X alongside Freud Communications, which tells us that actually this endeavour is about delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. This is all part of progressing the global agenda. They've been involved in this, very active early this year in signing up voters, young voters in particular. And I got this email this morning through from them saying that they've now signed up 1.6 million, the number in the bottom right-hand corner, over 1.6 million young voters who are going to be flooding the electoral system. And they're all going to be voting for Labour, basically. It seems to be that this has been already decided in advance. Who's pulling the strings here? We've already talked about Blair and various other organisations, but I've just found out that Alistair Campbell was intimately involved in setting it up. Meti Choban here expressing his thanks to Alistair Campbell on Twitter yesterday. We've also found out from Dan Laws here, who works on My Life, My Say, that Chatham House are now involved as well. And they're actually running events next week with them. Quite remarkable. And they're going to be doing this with a whole bunch of other organisations as well. So they've got 300 organisations involved in the run-up to the general election, including 40 of the UK's biggest brands, hundreds of young activists. You can see there, like the young fella in that image. I mean, when I first looked at it, it almost looked like he's in the playground. I don't think it is quite in the playground, but they really are targeting very, very young people to get involved in this. And who is Dan Laws? So he works with Give an X and My Life, My Say. He's also, you can see he's pictured there with Prince William. He's on the board of something called the Diana Award. And he's also a Schwarzman Scholar. And the Schwarzman Scholarship is a 1-year fully funded master's program in Beijing designed to build a global community of future leaders who will serve to deepen understanding between China, where they're basically developing a lot of these globalist technologies and their policies, and the rest of the world, right? So that's what another organization, and obviously that's backed by Stephen Schwarzman, who is the chief executive and founder of Blackstone. So this is just another individual alongside all of the others that we've been speaking about today and on various other shows at various other points of time, sitting behind the scenes at My Life, My Say, exerting control over the UK political system.
Yes, indeed, Ben. And we're just going to end this little segment with a short piece of video of Keir Starmer being asked a question. I believe this was last night, but I could be wrong because I didn't watch it. But let's just listen to this.
Collins, whereabouts are you? Kate.
Hi, Keir. 3 years ago, you criticised your MP, Rosie Duffield, for saying only women have a cervix. You recently backtracked on this. What do you believe now, and how do we know that you will stick to your views?
So Rosie Duffield said in 2020, only women have a cervix. You said in response, that's something that shouldn't be said, it's not right.
Well, look, on the biology, I agree with what Tony Blair said the other day.
Right, so frankly, we don't need to listen to what else he had to say there, because as soon as he said, I agree with what Tony Blair said, Ben, that's all we need to know.
Tony Blair, the man who just won't disappear from public life.
Yeah, indeed. What more can we say? Okay, well, look, we've got to leave it there for today. I'm going to say thank you very much to Ben, to Debbie, and to Cheryl for joining us today. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back in a few minutes if you're on the members live stream for some extra. We hope to see you all there. If you're not a member and you'd like to join us for extra, please join us. The details are at support.ukcolumn.org. Please join us, and you can join us for extra then every week. But otherwise, we will see you Monday as usual, and hope everyone has a great weekend. Bye-bye.